I've been in LA for about 25 years, and sometimes you hope that if you're at a place long enough that people would begin to see the world at least a little bit from your perspective. Right. Yeah. Did you ever have someone come and ask you a question, you realize that their question is giving you an insight to something about yourself? I had this young guy named Shane. He's in his early 20s now, maybe 20, 21. And he has been at Mosaic all of his life. I know his parents. His dad and I worked on some film projects years ago and when I was working in the film industry. And so I've known their family forever. And he's one of those savants. He has that genius IQ. He's like DC. And his questions always make me nervous. And he'll always come to me and say, Pastor Erwin, I have a question. And I sort of freeze up a little bit. Because I go, okay, a 15-year-old is going to trap me. But I just try to have an open spirit, and I say, sure, go ahead, Shane. So all of his life, he's been able to ask whatever questions he has. So he came up to me a couple of months ago, and he said, Pastor, I want to have a question. I said, sure, go ahead, Shane. And I thought it would be about, God or extraterrestrial life or interplanetary travel, something, that would match his IQ. And he said, is it okay to be competitive? Wow. When he asked me that question, it kind of threw me off. Because one, I should have known he was competitive, but I didn't expect him to ask that kind of question. And when he asked that question, it really caused an overwhelming sadness to fill me. Because when he asked that question, I realized that someone who grew up in our community, in our church, could actually wonder if it's okay to be competitive. And it said to me more about the messaging than it did about him. Yeah. And I said, yes, it's okay to be competitive, which I could tell caught him by surprise. That's not Jesus' answer, right? He goes, no, but what I mean is is it like really okay to be, he goes, because I'm very competitive and I just always feel bad. Yeah. And here's a guy who's trying to become like Jesus. But he has a driving competition inside of him. He doesn't know how to reconcile them. And as we're talking, I said, no, Shane, it is absolutely fundamentally human to be competitive at your best. And I said, I know. We talk a lot more about collaboration and a lot about communication. We talk a lot about teaming. And in fact, we talk about it so much that competition is now the dark side of the human spirit. Yeah. And so if you're competitive, you're sort of antiquated, you're old school, you're out of touch. Wow. And he said, well, yeah, but is it okay to be competitive against other people? He was being real specific. Right. And I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, I like looking around the room and going, okay, I'm going to be the best. Yeah. He goes, is that okay? And I said, oh, I thought you wanted to be the best. He goes, well, I do want to be the best. And I said, no, I thought you wanted to be the best in the world. He goes, well, I do want to be the best in the world. I said, well, why would you compare yourself to other people? And he goes, well, because it's a benchmark. I want to be better than everyone else. I said, all right, so if that's your motivation to be better than everyone else, what's going to motivate you when you're the best in the world? Because you won't have another human being to measure yourself against. He goes, well, yeah, I hadn't thought of that. I said, so what did you plan now to be so competitive that you're the best in the world? So comparing yourself to other people is irrelevant. Yeah, there you go. Compare yourself against the best of the best of the best and aspire for that. And that caused me to start thinking, well, what's the scriptures tell us about competition and this dirty word, ambition. One of the tricky things about being a spiritual person is that if you have any drive, any ambition, you have to hide it. Right. It's like a sleight of hand. I'm all about Jesus. I'm ambitious. I'm cooperative. I'm collaborative. I'm a team person. I'm about it, but I'm still kind of competitive and ambitious. In fact, ambition is not a virtue in our minds. Ambition is something we're supposed to become free of. And there's a particular passage that sort of moves us in that direction. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3 says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. And the moment we read that, we go, you see, ambition is wrong. Except for one thing. It says, do nothing out of vain conceit, or selfish ambition. It doesn't say do anything out of ambition. It says do nothing out of selfish ambition. And so if it's only selfish ambition that's a problem, then ambition is actually a virtue. Because only a virtue can be corrupted. But even when we think, well, ambition is a good thing, you ever heard it said, well, just be careful, don't be too ambitious. See, that sort of gives us an insight that we don't think ambition is a good thing. Because do you ever have anybody say to you, don't be too loving? Right? Keep a little hate. Just keep a little hate. Don't be too forgiving. Little bitterness, keep you protected. Right? Don't have too much integrity. Gotta have a little corruption, or you're not gonna enjoy life, right? See, whatever we think is a virtue, we never say don't have too much of that. But the reason we do say don't go over top here, don't get too ambitious, is because we actually don't think ambition is a virtue. We think it's a corruption. So where did this come from? And I started thinking about the words of Jesus. Because sometimes it's the words of Jesus that trip us up. But sometimes it's the way we interpret the words of Jesus that trips us up. So I want you to go with me to Matthew chapter 20. Begin reading in verse 20. It says, then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling down, asked a favor of him. What is it that you want? Jesus asked. She said, grant that one of these 2 sons of mine may sit at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom. You don't know what you're asking. Jesus said to them, can you drink the cup I am going to drink? We can, they answered. And Jesus said to them, you will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or my left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by my Father. When the 10 heard about this, they were indignant with the 2 brothers. Jesus called them together and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Now, this whole scenario to me is filled with comedy. Because you have 2 brothers, John and James, and they're the sons of Zebedee. They are the sons of thunder. And they want something. Have you ever wanted something, but you were afraid to ask? So you sent someone else? They sent their mommy. So here is the scenario. These rugged men, the sons of thunder, send their mommy to Jesus to ask Jesus if they could have a special place in Jesus' kingdom. Could one of my boys have the left, another one have the right? And Jesus, I don't want to be too imposing, so you can choose whichever one sits on whichever side. And then what happens next to me is so interesting. Jesus doesn't even answer her. She answers them. So that means they're standing behind their mom. They're standing behind their mom while their mom is asking on their behalf, and Jesus doesn't even answer her. He just looks right past her to them. Do you know what you're asking? Yeah. And then Jesus begins to unwrap what they're asking, what it's going to cost them. Because, see, we all want greatness, but we don't want sacrifice. We want the outcome of greatness, but we don't want the process of greatness. And Jesus, you understand that you're asking, that you're being ambitious for a level of greatness that may cost you more than you're willing to sacrifice. And they said, no, we understand. And then Jesus begins to piece together a new frame of greatness. But I think it's interesting. Verse 24 says that when the 10 heard about this, they were indignant with the 2 brothers. I love the word indignant. Have you ever been indignant? Yeah. You know what I find? We're indignant when someone else just did what we wanted to do. Can you believe he asked her out? Yep. And you didn't. And you are indignant and alone. But he has a date. There's a job opening. It's a raise, it's a promotion. But you're hoping your boss sees you. But someone has the audacity to go and tell them, I'm the right person for that job. You are indignant because they got the job. You were there longer than them, but they had the audacity to ask. So you got to watch and do what you're told. You ever been indignant? They were indignant because the two asked for what they wanted. How dare they ask Jesus for the positions of greatness? I deserve that. And then Jesus begins to give them a contrast, and this is where I think we get confused. He starts talking about how the rulers of the Gentiles lorded over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. So Jesus is actually not telling them to not pursue greatness, to not have this ambition. He's just telling them, you have the wrong model. And the reason I'm concerned for you is that you only have one perspective of how greatness happens and what it looks like. And then he says, instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. And this is the part we catch on to. Must be your servants. We all know to be like Jesus, we need to become servants. We know that. If you're a follower of Christ, if you've ever paid any attention, you know that the virtue in God's economy is to serve. But here's the problem. We just slide right past the first half of Jesus' statement. He says, if anyone wants to be great, ... So the second half doesn't even apply to us if we don't want to be great. See, I think a lot of us skipped right over that and got to the servant part because we keep confusing apathy with servanthood.
Talk about it.
And we act like our paralysis is humility. Our lack of ambition is not a virtue. Jesus says, wait a minute, I want to teach you how to be great. But this only applies to the person who wants to be great. And the problem is we have this ability to do this jujitsu with the language of Jesus and make something that Jesus actually calls a virtue into a sin. You are not ambitious by accident. And if you're not ambitious, you are apathetic.
Yeah, there you go.
I know that sounds a little harsh for 9 a.m.
Yeah, come on. Let's go, come on.
But my experience is that faith has given us air cover for our apathy. We're going to be like Jesus, so we're just going to float through life. Never making a difference, just sort of taking care of ourselves. I was talking to a graduate from UCLA, and I said, man, what are you going to do now that you've finished school? He goes, you mean to pay the bills? Like, you just got a degree from one of the most prestigious universities in the United States. You are a citizen in a nation in the free world, and your ambition is to pay the bills. Said, no, not to pay the bills. That would be a tragedy. It would be a travesty of opportunity. No, to create wealth so that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people can have jobs and can feed their families. Whoever wants to be great. We don't say that, right? I want to be a servant. See, and then there's a small group of people who go, I want to be great. And that's why Jesus needs to teach you. He said, okay, you want to be great. Now I need to reframe what greatness looks like. But if you don't want to be great, you're not even to the servant part. Because he doesn't want to make you weak. He wants to make you powerful. He wants to make you the kind of servant that knows you could rule, but you serve. See, you're not a slave because it's your only option. You've taken your strength and you've chosen the virtue of servanthood. So anybody want to be great? So I decided I'm going to start having my own like little AA meetings. Ambitious Anonymous. Because I don't have a lot of addictions other than popcorn, froyo. But I am ambitious And that's my addiction. I wake up in the morning terrified that I will do nothing meaningful with my life. I wake up in the morning wondering if I will not live up to God's intention for me. And so I thought, I'm going to have a little cathartic meeting. Hello, my name is Erwin McManus, and I am ambitious, but I don't want to be cured.
Let's go. Come on. Let's go.
So I wonder, does anyone here want to be great?
Come on.
I don't know. Because he wants to teach you how to step into that greatness, not how to avoid it.
Wow.
It's just that we don't believe the path to greatness is servanthood. So we think, oh, Jesus must be against greatness because he's for servanthood. And Jesus is saying, no, I'm not trying to move you away from greatness to servanthood. I'm trying to get you to greatness through servanthood. And he goes on and says, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Do we understand that Jesus is the greatest servant who ever lived? Yes. But we also have to understand that Jesus is the greatest man who ever lived. Yes. Jesus accomplished his greatest mission. No one in the world was more ambitious than Jesus. He didn't just come to save one or a few. He came to save us all. I mean, what an ambition. He came to save the world. And the only way he could save the world, the only way that level of greatness could be achieved is to step into the greatest level of humility and servanthood. There's another place like this, Mark chapter 9, just slightly nuanced. It says that they came to Capernaum. When Jesus was in the house, he asked them, what were you arguing about on the road? But they kept quiet. Because on the way, they had argued about who was the greatest. I love that because you ever wonder just what the disciples talk about when they had free time? Yeah, because we hear Jesus teaching a lot, but I just kind of like to get behind the scenes and hear what John and Peter and Nathaniel and Bartholomew were talking about. Sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and the servant of all. Now, Jesus said, hey, what were you guys talking about? Now, I have the privilege of being the lead pastor of Mosaic, and I have a team, and we travel a lot. And I can tell you, a lot of times they kind of cluster without me. Sometimes I think, oh, wow, I'm walking too fast. Sometimes I think I'm walking too slow. I don't know if that ever happens to you, Pastor Rich, where your crew just sort of separates from you a little bit and just starts talking. And you can kind of hear the murmuring, but you can't hear the meaning. And this is what's happening. Jesus, maybe he was walking too fast, maybe he was walking too slow, but they sort of grouped together apart from him. I think that's strange because if I had the chance to walk with Jesus, I think I would walk with Jesus. But maybe not if I'm having a conversation I don't really want him in. That never happens in your life, right? Where you're trying to be somewhere where you know Jesus doesn't want to be. Have a conversation you don't really want Jesus to hear. And I love how subtle Jesus is. He says, hey, what were you guys talking about? Like he didn't know, right? and it says, but they were silent. They kept quiet. Why? It says they were quiet because on the way they had argued about who was the greatest. So now I know what they didn't say. Anybody here a baller? Anybody play basketball? I mean, I turned 59 this month, and I still love playing ball. I mean, I don't like these old guys invited me one time, people my age. And it was the most boring experience of my life. They're so fragile. I was afraid to hurt them. And I got to play with guys in their 20s. We got to go down. In fact, I was at a doctor the other day, goes, what happened? Are you in some kind of wrestling federation? Because you dislocated a rib. It's just ball. A hard drive, no big deal. And I love playing ball with these guys. It's just so much fun. But imagine if we were playing with Michael Jordan, in his prime, or LeBron James in his prime. Ooh, wow. It's the first disturbing thing I've said today. Imagine if we were walking and you got LeBron and he's just walking ahead of us because he's massive. If we were talking about who's the best basketball player. But none of us said LeBron. Rich said, I'm the best basketball player. Doesn't matter if I make it. I'm the best looking when I go in for the layup. Hey, what if we're all, I'm the best. No, man, I can hit those threes. And then LeBron pauses and he says, what are you guys talking about? See, if anyone had actually said, LeBron, we're talking about you. Because a conversation happened about who's the greatest. And well, it's kind of obvious. Here, the 12 men that Jesus chose, talking about who's the greatest. Jesus is walking with them, and Jesus doesn't come to mind. They're with God in flesh and blood. How could anybody go, I'm the greatest? Even Peter, who always got it wrong, how in the world could he say, I'm the greatest? I mean, maybe Thomas said, well, I don't know if I am, but none of you are. But isn't it odd that the 12 people closest to Jesus, not one of them said Jesus is the greatest? See, I think they had such a poor, corrupt definition of greatness, they did not see Jesus as great yet. So when Jesus says, what are you talking about? They kept quiet because they'd argued about who was the greatest. If somebody had just said Jesus, they would have said, we're talking about you. We're talking about greatness, and Jesus, you're the greatest that ever lived. But they didn't. And then Jesus says, if anyone wants to be first, you must be last. This is the tricky mathematics of the kingdom of God. Anybody want to be first? Anybody woke up this morning saying, I want to be last? No, I just sort of want to be in the middle. I don't want the responsibility and the pressure of being first. But I don't want to feel so bad about myself that I'm last. I just want to be in the middle of the pack. That has become what we call church. We're present, but we're not ambitious. And Jesus, no, if you want to be first, you got to be last. And I'm okay. I want to be first. But the only way I'm going to be first is I got to be last. So Jesus can see me. I'm last. Look, Lord, I'm last. But how long do I have to be last before I'm first? You ever thought that? I want to be first, but only if I can only be first by being last, I'll be last. But I don't want to be last forever. And we're in the line at the back, facing the wrong direction, going, okay, I'm last, but I hope Jesus sees me and calls me out to the front. We realize that when we're last, Jesus says, oh, you're facing the wrong way, turn around. Because the person who chooses to be last is actually the one who's first. We were playing basketball, and it was a bad day for me. I mean, nothing went in. It was just a really bad day. I lost a lot. And losing is not my preferred experience. And I like taking the lesser team and winning. But this didn't matter. On that day, every team with me lost. And when they switched the teams up, I'd still lose. And I realized that we've tried every formula, and the unifying factor is me. Whatever team I'm on loses. And so and then we had too many players, so if you lost, you got bumped out and you didn't get to play, which that's last, like no man should be last. And so I was bumped out. I rented the gym, and I'm bumped out. So I go down the hall, I see one chair, and I sit down in this chair, and I just want a little time to reflect on the meaning of life. And a little while goes by, and my son Aaron, who says give him a shout out, Erwin McManus, we love you when you're not here at VOUS. And he walks by me and he goes, pouting? You need to have some respect. He just walked by pouting, and then he came back and he goes, why are you sitting here alone? You okay? I said, Aaron, I'm sitting here alone. Can you leave me alone? He said, no, just you all right? Because you look like you're pouting. I said, get out of my face. Just go. So I grab a basketball, I go to the other side of the court, I just shoot. And thought, maybe I can get my rhythm back, Maybe I can get my Jesus back, because he's not loving me right now. There's something wrong, And I start confessing every sin I can think of, Because I know I need to be in sync with the creator of the universe for my ball to flow. And I'm shooting by myself, and Aaron comes over and he goes, Dad, you okay? I said, yeah, I'm okay. He goes, I don't know, you just don't seem okay. I said, I'm okay. He goes, Dad, you just seem upset. I said, okay. I said, I know I've hit it well all of your life. But I hate losing. I'm really competitive. I've tried to hide it all of my life, but I just am. And Aaron looked at me and goes, Dad, you never hit it well. It set me free. I created this message. I said, I never hit it well. Why was I wasting so much energy hiding the fact that I hate to lose and I prefer winning? That I'm ambitious, and no matter what I do, I want to be the best in the world, or the best I can be. And I cannot control whether there's someone better than me out there. So I can control whether I'm the best version of me in the world. There's a moment that I think really connects to this. It's in the life of David. You know the story, but I just want you to see it from this vantage point. Picking up in chapter 17 of 1 Samuel, verse 33, it says, Saul replied to David, you are not able to go out against this Philistine. There was a giant, and no one wanted to fight him, and David shows up. You are not able to go against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man. And he has been a warrior from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant, there it is. See, we see David as a king, and we see David as a warrior, and we see David as a shepherd, depending on what part of the story we come into. But we don't actually see David as a servant. But this is how David saw himself. Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by the hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. So Saul said, David, all right, go ahead. The Lord be with you, because I won't be. I think this is an important moment in the process of how God pulls out greatness from within us. See, because David was the king. We even call him King David. That's how we see him. And how many of us don't want to find our way of being king? We want God to do great things in our lives. We want to see God do something in us that cannot be explained by any other way except God. We go, God wants to turn you into a king, but you cannot be a king unless you're willing to be a warrior. In other words, we want to be kings without ever fighting the battles. But David became a warrior. And when he was a warrior, he allowed God to create in him the material for him to be a king. But what made David a warrior was that before he fought the giant, he was a shepherd. And now, I'm telling you, he was not a shepherd like other shepherds. He was the kind of shepherd who killed lions and bears. I'm telling you, that was not the job description for shepherd. They weren't even his sheep. It said, it's my father's sheep. Look, if a lion came and took a sheep that was my father's sheep, I would go, hey, that's just the cost of doing business. You lose a sheep, you gain a sheep. I'm not going to go chase down that lion. How about you? And if you don't chase down the lion, you will always be a shepherd, never a warrior, and never a king. See, David elevated the definition of what it meant to be a shepherd. So he said, so I went after the lion, I grabbed it by the hair, I slapped it around, I said, not on my watch, and I took my little sheep back. That sheep would be traumatized for life. Oh, and there was a bear. I chased down the bear and I got that sheep back. See, this is not what shepherds do. And by the way, all the warriors were terrified of Goliath because the warriors of David's time did not have on their resume giant killer. David elevated the definition of what it meant to be a warrior. And there had never been a king like David. When David became king, he elevated what it meant to be a king. Every place where David stood, he changed the definition of that role. Because he was a king that was once a warrior, and a warrior that was once a shepherd. And he was a shepherd who understood, I'm a servant. See, and so many of us, we want the position, we want the title, but David had one title, servant. He was the servant who became a shepherd, and the servant who became a warrior, and the servant who became a king. He chose to be last, so he became first.
Come on. It's great.
See, December 15th, I think it was. My wife and I walked into a doctor's office, and I was just going through routine tests because I couldn't get life insurance for the last 7, 8 years. And I thought, wow, it's so strange that I can't get life insurance because I'm so healthy. But this doctor said, there's something wrong with you, so they did more tests and did some biopsies. And I sat next to across from this doctor, and he looked at me and he goes, you have cancer. I didn't expect that. And when he said that, I could see Kim, my wife, just sort of crumble under the weight of that. And we were planning a family dinner at a really great restaurant to celebrate. That was fine. And I didn't change the location, so I met Aaron and Mariah there. And in this public space, I had to tell them I had cancer. And it didn't go well. It was 2 weeks from Christmas, a few days from my wife's birthday. And it was just a really heavy December. And out of the 8 places they biopsied, 5 of them were malignant, and the cancer had spread, and I probably had it for 10 years. And we didn't know how extensive. And I realized, this might be my last Christmas. And I bought Kim's gift and Mariah's gift and Aaron's gift, knowing this might be the last gift I ever give them as their dad on Christmas. And then we went to some specialists, and they said, no, you don't qualify for radiation treatment or anything like that. It's more extensive than that, so you have to have surgery, and this is our best shot. So they held up 3 doctors, 3 surgeons, and said, these are the 3 best surgeons in the world. I can get one of them if you want them. I said, get all 3. And the first one that responded was Dr. Khalili. And there's a robot that is used when they go into you called Da Vinci. And I didn't know this until the day of my surgery, but Dr. Khalili invented Da Vinci. And right before the surgery, I had to fill out these forms, and I noticed that the procedure was different than what I expected. And I said, but it seems like the description's different. He goes, yeah, we realized this morning that there's more cancer than we projected. I said, oh, okay. And the surgery was supposed to last 2 hours. It lasted 6 hours. And then after the surgery, Dr. Khalili told me, when we went inside, it was worse than we thought. Okay. He goes, but I think I got it all. I think I got it all. And when Shane asked me, is it wrong to be competitive? I said, Shane, I have a theory. My surgeon, Dr. Khalili, he's so stoic, doesn't show you any emotions. He just doesn't let you see behind the wall. I said, but I think he's really competitive. So I think Dr. Khalili hates to lose. And I would never want a surgeon who was okay with losing. And so I went back in for my update to see where I was on cancer after the surgery. And I said, Dr. Khalili, I have a question I have to ask you. And he said, of course. I said, I have a theory about you. And he goes, what's that? I said, I think that you're really competitive. I said, I think that you hate to lose. I think you see cancer as your competition, and I am the playing field. And you will not sleep if you lose a patient because you're so competitive, so stoic, so guarded, so professional. And then I saw it. His face broke. A smile broke out. His eyes lit up. And he looked at me and said, I am so competitive. He goes, I hate to lose. Man, when he looked at me and said, you're cancer free. See, I knew. I knew in that moment that ambition was a good thing. I am so grateful that there wasn't a bunch of surgeons sat back and said, there's nothing we can do about cancer. This is just a losing proposition. And so with Dr. Khalili, when they told me I had cancer, I went home that night. I'd been writing a book called The Last Arrow, and I thought it was the last book I would ever write. And I thought, how strange that my last book is called The Last Arrow. And that night when I discovered I had cancer, I opened up the manuscript to edit it, and the first line I read said this: I need to tell you before you hear it from someone else that I'm dying. So how strange that I wrote those words a year before I knew I had cancer. But the next line is the most important line in the book. But then again, so are you. See, we're all dying. When we took our first breath, we were one step closer to our last breath. You get just a small window of time in this world. And it would be a tragedy if you just existed and didn't live. If you just survived and didn't thrive. If your whole goal was just to make it through the day rather than to make a difference in the world. So they put me in my, we can thank God for that. They put me in my hospital room at 9 p.m. and at midnight, I woke up my wife Kim and I called the nurse. They said, what's wrong? And I said, I'm getting up and I'm taking a walk. And my wife said, no, you're not. And the nurse says, no, you're not. And I said, no, I am. They go, no, you're not. And I said, look, can I do any more damage? I had 6 holes in my stomach for where they did the surgery, glued together. And they said, well, you can't do any more damage. So then I'm getting up and I'm taking a walk. And the nurse says, do you want painkillers? I said, no. I want to feel the pain. I want to know how much pain I'm in, because if I can overcome this, I can face anything. And I got up out of that bed and went walking down the hall. They thought I was out of my mind. And 3 hours later, I got up and I walked 4 times further. And then a couple hours, about 8 a.m., I took a shower when they were on a shift change so they couldn't see me. And I got myself dressed and I said, I'm ready to go home. I said, you're out of your mind. I said, yeah, I am. And then I asked Dr. Khalili, what's the fastest anyone's ever recovered? What's the fastest anyone's ever gotten a catheter out of their body? What's the fastest a person's ever played basketball after having surgery for cancer? So 3 weeks after I had surgery, I got that catheter out of me quick. I said to my wife, Kim, sweetie, I'm claustrophobic. I need to step out of the house for a little while. She goes, you cannot leave the house. You just had surgery for cancer. I said, I know, but I'm just going to head out. I'm just going to take a drive and get some fresh air and just kind of enjoy life a little bit. She goes, okay. I dropped my sports bag down the stairs without her seeing it. I called some of my boys. I rented a gym. And 3 weeks after I had surgery, I was playing basketball. I was bleeding, but it's okay. And my wife said, why are you doing this? Why are you pushing yourself so hard? And I said, because I wrote this book and I want to live this book. Because I want to be able to stand in a moment that others would consider the worst moment in your life and say, there's nothing that can stop you except what's inside of you. And if you will decide that you will live the life God created you to live, if you will decide to pursue greatness, if you will allow ambition to be your fuel, if you will decide your life isn't about you, but it's about others, if you will decide that greatness is only found through servanthood, your life will be forever profoundly altered. And you will wake up every morning. And on that last day, when you have no more life to live in this world, you will look back on your life and you will know that you lived bold, that you never settled, and you finished well. And I want you to know something. You are not here by accident. God has placed you here to do something significant that matters. And if you're here and you've never trusted Jesus with your life, if you're here and you've never crossed that line of faith, if you're here and you've been uncertain about God, I want you to know something. You're just existing. But if you will cross the line of faith, if you will give your life to Jesus, you will not just exist, you will live.